do just fine.
If the foundation's adequate and the big factor is a big roof over it, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, there's houses 500, 700 years old.
Wow. That's amazing.
And mind you, our warranty's only good for 400. So.
Right. Welcome to the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast. All right, welcome to it. Another episode of the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast. My name is George, co-host Scott Sunderveld here.
Hey, great to be here.
Scott, you've been stoked for our guest tonight. I'll let you do the intro for our guest tonight.
Yeah, I'd be honored. I'm very excited about our guest tonight. We got local legend here, Mark Deagle. If you could see him, he's decked out in his cowboy hat. He's got a belt buckle and a good cowboy mustache too. And yeah, he's a bit of a local legend here. I've known his family for many years. Our kids grew up together. And in fact, my son worked at your log building area there for a bit, peeling logs.
Yeah, that's right. He did.
Ago. Yeah.
Scott's son, any good at peeling logs?
He was quite amazing.
Oh, yeah?
He had a little trouble with some comprehension on some things, but once he got it, he had it.
Right on. Yeah, so there's so many things we could dive into tonight. Mark has built so many log facilities, lodges around Alberta, British Columbia, and beyond. We'll get into some of that. He's an award-winning log builder and also very much linked to the land here with his Métis heritage and little rodeo as well. So yeah, lots of stuff we can talk about.
Yeah, my parents were really excited when I said, yeah, Mark Deagle's coming on. They're like, my mom went to, I think it was her first time last summer, out to the Hannigan cabin out in Switzer there, like the Joachim Valley. And she said when she saw that, she's like, oh, this is a Mark Deagle build. Like she could tell that one. So yeah, they were real excited to have it on. How long you been log building for, Mark?
Well, first of all, I'll say thanks for the introduction, you two guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Scott gave me a call there the other evening, and I was excited to be a part of the program here. So, yeah, thank you. I will say 46 years. Actually, I've got one more month to get to that date.
Yeah.
But I've been building log homes for 46 years, wow. And basically with no interruption in between. It's not like I've taken another job during that time. Yeah. Can hardly believe that it's been solid work for that many years, but that's right, 46 years.
And you still have all your fingers, which shocks me because I had uncles who lost their fingers on the farm and that sort of thing. So yeah. I'm always impressed with the guy who's working with chainsaws and heavy machinery his whole life and still has all his digits. So well done.
I think right from day one, I've tried to stay focused and just kind of maybe a bit of a slow-moving guy, but I always try to think about what the consequences might be, and I haven't been completely successful, but lucky enough.
What got you into it?
I was thinking about the answer to that question, and I would say I grew up in Jasper.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think I would have been 9 years old, and there was a historical society picnic or get together out at the Moberly Cabins, which is an old homestead about 10-15 miles outside of Jasper.
Yeah.
And I went with my grandfather, and my mom and dad were there, and I can remember very clearly looking at that old homestead, and it was I've been back many times since, but even then I knew that it was dovetail corners and hand-hewn logs. The sides were taken off, and that just stuck with me. Huh. And so from that age, even as I got into my late teens, I thought, I'd love to build log houses. But I thought, how do you start? There's not many people doing it. And but so it was a dream, and it was a dream to build a log house. And sometimes I still feel like I'm dreaming, and I think I'm somewhere up around 214 structures.
Wow!
Oh my goodness!
So
that's amazing.
It went beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah. That's amazing. Before we turn the mics on, you mentioned something about your mentor that kind of taught you how to do it. Can you tell us about your mentor? And
yeah, there was actually a fellow that I grew up with in Jasper. He had wandered down into the Okanagan Valley, and there he got a job with a log builder, and I thought, I can't believe it. So I wrote my friend George, was his name as well, wrote George a letter to hand to his boss, and one day I received a phone call, and it was Reed, Reed Finlayson, and he seemed like a real old guy to me at the time. He would have been 42 years old.
Yeah.
I was 21, and he said we could use some help. So a week later, there I was, the
Wow.
apprentice log builder.
Yeah.
But Reed was just a super practical kind of guy. He'd been a former truck driver, logger, and just made to build log houses. But his practical approach, in spite of his old age of 42 years, I found it to be real progressive and innovative. And so that kind of set the stage. But something I'd have to say is I entered into it with a romantic notion, kind of the log cabin on the mountainside, right with the lake out in front.
Yeah.
And when it became technical, I kind of got dragged down with the idea. And then, of course, you're sort of clumsy with your movements, and it took a while to develop any sort of finesse for it. But as that started to come, then I realized I was in my element. But I say it was this romantic notion of just the log cabin, and the fact of having to actually build it just lost my interest for a while.
Yeah.
Until I got the hang of it, and then away I went. And
It's funny that you use that term romantic notion, because if you look on my notes here, I've got exactly that term written down, because I was thinking about log building today, and I still have, I've built more survival structures than I could ever count, lean-tos and A-frames and all sorts of
With
stuff.
logs too.
Yeah, with logs, but nothing technical, right? This is sort of something you do and set it up so that you can survive the night. Although some I've built and they can last for years. But I do have this romantic notion of like going into the bush, pull out the axe and the saw, build a trapper's cabin,
Yeah.
put in a little wood stove. I mean, don't you too, George? Like, it just feels
I love it. Yeah.
the idea just feels so great. And so, hopefully you've kept some of that nostalgia with the work you do. And I know you take a lot of pride in your work. People can see your log homes and know that it was you that built it. I had a kind of a funny question. I was like, I know you're using power tools and chainsaws and hoists and all that, but when you look at these old trappers' cabins, like the Moberly one, and these folks were using just axes and handsaws, like, have you ever done something just from that scratch, or could you do it if you had to?
the chainsaw has always been involved.
Yeah.
And but well, just yesterday we built a kind of a countertop, and I took it into a cabinet shop to be finished and fit in Edmonton. And I walked in there and I saw tools like I've never seen before. Some of them I've just never seen them before. It was big industrial cabinet making tools that were so highly advanced. And it did make me think about our arsenal of tools and really just how basic they are. And I think that was another thing that promoted me with the idea of log building, is that I thought it doesn't take that much to get going. It wasn't a big investment. But yeah, a chainsaw has been a real mainstay. Another tool that we use very much is like a grinder, sander. And but no, to this day, the axe is part of the tools. A draw knife, which actually used to remove the bark from the logs, and again, that's daily tool. And but no, I've often thought, and that's something I said, what got me started was the romantic notion. But even just last weekend, we were out with your daughter Jane, came along on the ski trip and up to Lake O'Hara, and that's very traditionally built cabin, and there's just something about that building that brings me right back to what I thought when I was like 17 years old. So yeah, that notion has not escaped me or left me in all those years.
That's great. Yeah, that's great to hear.
Do you got a favorite tool?
I think it would be the chainsaw. Yeah.
Like, what kind of chainsaw are you using?
Um,
You're attached to a brand, or
that could be a politically loaded question.
Husky or steel, usually, right?
I got started with Husqvarna.
okay?
Yeah. And anybody on my crew that has a still is not invited to the Christmas party.
What's your crew look like? Like what's a day in like a life of the log builder? What are you guys doing?
Again, just explain, is it like appearance or?
I'm just like curious of the process. Even I know I was like doing some research on this last night. Like, just can you walk us through the building of a log house, like how you start and where it goes?
And I say, and it's changed very little in the entire time I've done it, because we do strive to keep it traditional.
Yeah.
And so what? First thing would be the acquisition of logs, and I've gone down a lot of different roads and dealing with different suppliers. But for the last few years, I've been dealing with a fellow from Edson who brings this, or actually I'll go in, he allows me to pick in his stock, and it's lodgepole pine is our preferred species.
Is that your preferred, like if you compare to spruce, cedar, Doug fir?
Yeah,
other options.
It sort of is.
Where you, just because it's straight, or
and
what?
Part of it's just like the trendy chef's diet, where everything's within the 100-mile radius. And
right,
I do.
Okay.
I like pine, and I feel that it's from the area here. And I've got a friend down Rocky Mountain House that builds exclusively with cedar that comes from Vancouver Island, the Queen or Haida Gwaii. And very expensive wood, and it's spectacular. It's wonderful, but at the same time, it's not indigenous to the immediate area here. So maybe that's just an excuse that I use, but I like working with lodgepole pine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want you to continue with George's question there, the process, but I'm just curious, is there a typical diameter you're looking for the average log home, or does it depend on the size of the structure?
Yeah, and it's hard to get like a lot of oversized pine, and so typically what we use is, and this would be butts of up to 24 inches in diameter, but what we look at, we is the top size of the log, because these are natural logs, of course, with the natural taper in them.
Yeah.
But we don't use anything in the walls that would be less 10 inches in diameter.
Okay.
Yeah. And
that's getting pretty small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see some houses, they're down to like 6 and 8, but that looks really small.
Yeah, those little trapper cabins, those little sticky black spruce, they use whatever they could find, right?
I can appreciate why they would use them as far as lifting equipment goes. And
easier.
if you're putting it on your shoulder, 6-inch log would be welcomed. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
so back to your process. You got your logs. You're peeling them. Do they have to season for a certain amount of time, or can you use them green, or how does that work?
It certainly works if there can be some seasoning on them, but we do build with what we call green logs. They might be 6 or 8 months off the stump, but they've still got quite a ways to go to dry. But just in the style and the nature of how we build, provisions for the shrinkage of the wood are taken into account. And because the logs are laid horizontally, and when a log dries, it doesn't dry in length, it dries only in diameter. And
yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, as the walls are stacked, they might start out at, say, a height of 10 feet, and 3 years later, that could diminish by as much as 4 inches. And because all the cells are just giving up a little bit of moisture and everything comes down. But because it's stacked horizontally, you've got the weight of the structure itself just kind of falling onto itself.
Sure.
And so the fits continue in spite of the fact that the log is shrinking.
Yeah, I've never built a log home, but I do a lot of bow building, self bows from the bush. And if you don't season bow wood properly, it gets a lot of checks and cracks, and I would imagine your green wood would be the same, right? Like, are you getting a lot of cracks
Yeah,
on a
and
greenwood cabin?
surprisingly enough, sort of the greener you build with, it's not a rule, but what we do is we cut a long channel into the bottom of each log so that it basically cups the log below it for the entire length of the log.
Is that called the Swedish cope?
And that would be called the Swedish cope.
Look at that. I'm pretending I know what I'm talking
Sounds
about.
like you
Yeah,
You get a gold star for that one,
Yeah.
Scott.
And the saddle notch, is that what you're using for your corner style? or-
It would the saddle notch technically would be a little bit different, but as I was saying before the introduction here, that the notch that we refer to it is the Norwegian notch,
Okay.
and I've got a brother that lives over in Sweden, and I went and visited him there years ago, and went to an outdoor museum, and there was a little house called the Norwegian farmstead from 1742. And what they'd done is they'd collected all these old buildings and put them into an outdoor museum right in downtown Stockholm. But there was this one, in the Norwegian farmstead, built in 1742, and there was the same notch that we're using to this day. So
Very
I'm
cool.
quite comfortable referring to it as the Norwegian notch.
Wow.
Well, and on the dates, because I was looking this up, how long does a log cabin last? And it was very interesting. Some people were saying like up to, let me see if I get this right, 100, 150 years, 60 to 150 years. And then elsewhere I've heard that in Europe there's structures that are up to 800 years that are still standing.
Yeah, I've driven right by a house in Switzerland. Well, it was 30 years ago. Switzerland had their 700th anniversary as a country, and that house was actually featured in a newspaper because it too was 700 years old.
Wow.
That's
And
crazy.
it would have been 4 years ago. A friend of mine, a log builder out of Bragg Creek, he visited that building, and at this point it was 728 or 730 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, and yeah.
So,
So
unless rot sets in, or mold, or carpenter ants, or water damage, that thing's going to just do just fine.
if the foundation's adequate, and the big factor is a big roof over it. Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, so yeah, there's houses 500, 700 years old.
Wow.
that's
And
amazing.
mind you, our warranty's only good for 400. So
Right.
Is that what your warranty is?
So you got a yard full of lodgepole pine. Someone's like, someone gives you a design, like I want the house to look like this, and you kind of draw it up, or how does that work?
yes, that's what has happened. I failed at kind of all other avenues in school, except I did okay in art and shop.
Okay.
Yeah, and
That's a good fit.
and so I taught myself how to be a draftsman. And in this day and age, it'd be very archaic because it's all hand drawing that I do. But it's a wonderful process to put me in touch with the house we're going to build.
Yeah.
So there's only a connection basically hopefully between my brain and my fingertips that goes onto paper, and as I say, it gives me a chance to do a dry run on the house before we actually physically build it. And but I've always left it up to my customer at the time to inspire me as to sort of
Yeah.
rooms that they would want. But I am surprised at how much freedom I've been given in a lot of these home designs. And I probably limit myself because something that keeps me within sort of certain confines is, well, one, practicality, and things like, everything should have a roof over it so that we don't have balconies rotting off the house, but yeah, say, and I guess I want the house to appear, in my estimation, to be very traditional.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got bogged down with some customers in that their ideas, I guess I just don't wish to grasp them. I would rather
Yeah.
go with things that I know can work, and I think my wife always gives me a bit of heat, saying it just looks like another Deagle house. And I thought, well, that's what they're supposed to look
That's what
like.
they're looking for.
That's what it's supposed to look like. Yeah.
So you guys put this together in your yard. Does the customer come out and take a look at it then?
Usually there's some visits.
Yeah.
And an interesting occurrence with those visits is the people come and I don't know what they're thinking, but when they see that all of this work is being done by hand, there's an excitement level that's just very satisfying to view.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It's incremental, right? You're seeing piece by piece. It must,
Yeah.
kind of builds that anticipation
Yeah.
for where it's going. And then you have to disassemble the whole thing and rebuild
That's
it, right?
correct. And we've got a system. We give each corner on the house a letter, and then each log starting from the bottom, it just goes like A1, A2, A3, A4. So it's quite a simple method. And and so we've done houses with up to 20 corners in them. Yeah. But that system works so well. And then when they all get put onto a semi-trailer and transported to wherever, and we've always gone along to be a part of the reassembly. And it's just that there's too many little complexities. I know it probably hasn't happened much recently, but there was log builders that would just send it out as kind of a kit home, leave it up to the homeowner.
IKEA kit.
Build it yourself.
And kind of like the IKEA concept, and I'm afraid that just wouldn't work very smoothly.
Oh, heck no. So how are you hoisting these gigantic logs? Like some of them must be thousands of pounds. Like you got cranes or...
In our yard, we have a front-end loader with an extended boom out the front. So it kind of works as almost like a portable crane. But on site, when we get to the location, hire a crane locally.
Okay.
And then he can just say we've got one person up on the semi-trailer, hopefully making good choices as to what log comes out next. And oftentimes in a simplistic house, start in the morning, at the end of the day, there's the silhouette of the structure standing, which is really exciting for us and even more exciting for the owner. But then they start to have this misconception. They think we're good workers. But then once we start getting into the basics of carpentry, say on the roof and that, all of a sudden the pace slows down.
Oh, for sure.
So that first day always kind of works negatively against us. Because
Yeah, the devil's in the details, right? All those tiny little things you have to
and
do.
they didn't see the 3-4 months that we went through building the house in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Is that like kind of standard, like 3-4 months for a house then?
I would say so. Yeah,
Yeah.
smaller one, a couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the longest you spent on a project?
Probably about 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That really gets into you then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you talked about some of the places you've built these. We know Alberta, British Columbia. Can you kind of give us a scope of where you've built your log cabins and some of what you would say maybe the greatest achievements or challenges? What comes to mind?
Yeah. Well, I'll just do a quick list of some of the locations where we've been lucky enough to build. Alberta, British Columbia, and we've got 3 structures up in the Yukon. We've done a home and a kind of a stylized log teepee up in, it was on the legislative grounds up in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah,
Huh.
and but there was a Canadian fellow who had moved down to Hood River in Oregon, which is right along the Columbia Gorge, and he was a real keen windsurfer, and that's kind of a mecca in the world for kite sailing and windsurfing.
Yeah.
So I knew Rick just as he was in the process of moving down there, and he knew that I built log houses. And that relationship, I guess, went on for 25 years, in which time in Oregon we built 23 homes down there. And then through a very roundabout connection, we built for a billionaire who wanted a little hunting lodge on some property in Arkansas. And Arkansas was a cultural experience. It's pretty uptown, but I think I did see some hillbillies in that part of the country. Yeah, but no, that was really interesting. And then probably the most distant location, actually, I was lucky enough to go there, was we did a couple of log saunas on that built at our site, loaded into a container, and then I caught up with the container and unloaded it in the Netherlands,
Wow.
just outside of Rotterdam in Holland. And and that was really interesting experience. Well, especially one of them got set up at a spa just outside of Rotterdam, and it was Monday when we started the assembly there, and it was Ladies' Day at the spa, and there was 200 naked Dutch ladies, and I don't think I've quite recovered from that. They say you get used to it, but I certainly didn't on that day.
You weren't focusing very well on the log building.
No, I was lucky I didn't get hurt that day. Yeah. But and then we also shipped a couple of homes to Japan, but never got to go on that. Just prefabbed them, and there was a crew there that was versed in reassembly.
Wow.
So even these ones that you're doing in the Yukon, Netherlands, Japan, everything's still built in your yard? Or in Oregon, did you, for example, get local lumber?
No, everything was built here,
Wow.
put onto a semi-trailer and
Yeah.
transported across the line.
Wow, that's quite something.
Yeah.
How big of a crew do you have?
Right now there's four fellows that work
Wow.
with me. Yeah. And they're all keeners. Like, they'd be wise to get a good oil field job or
Yeah.
do something else. But there's there's an appeal to it that I guess the same appeal that it has for me has for them.
It's the romantic notion.
A little bit that's in there. Yeah.
In the past 46 years, have you noticed like the price of a log home really increases? Like even just for you guys to get the materials and build it, like does it go up quite a bit?
Oh, it certainly has, and I wish that's something I could keep up with.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I built for one guy, and he'd look a little sideways every time I handed him an invoice.
Yeah.
And he'd say, "That's not what a set of dump truck tires used to cost in 1968."
Yeah.
And I'm sort of that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of coming into its own now for some reason, and I think because I feel I should reach an age of retirement, and maybe I've just kind of backed off on some things, and so I think I'm just I'm not trying to put out dirty prices or anything like that. It's just that it's going to cost this, and we'll see if if you want to do it, that's what the price will be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so financially, I think I'm doing better, but it's probably been a struggle just because. Back to that darn romantic notion.
Yeah.
I was more involved in the building rather than sort of the finances of running a company. So,
Right.
but I have to admit, one way or another, it's always succeeded. So
Yeah. So sort of along the same lines, I was wondering about the future of log building, like for some young upstart who's also 21, like when you started listening to this. Is the future bright for log building? Is there a huge demand? Is it growing? How has it been affected by, supply and demand, but also insurance companies, I'm sure, look differently at a log home, especially with all the fire damage. We know stuff burned down in Jasper, perhaps even some of the homes that you built burned up there. So maybe you can reflect on kind of the future of log building as you see it.
Yeah, I'd be a little concerned. Like there's still keeners out there, and obviously, people who want to surround themselves in that environment. But we're doing a little place in Saskatchewan right now, and the people there are presently living in a granary, and but now they're getting this new log house built. And there's all these energy codes that they sort of have to answer to. So it's becoming more difficult, probably to own any home, but and I think more specifically a log home. And then the insurance companies, like you say, and I can only imagine what's going to happen as a result of the fires in Jasper. So I think it's and I think the trend, it'll never go away, but I do think it's diminishing somewhat.
Is that right? Oh, that's sad to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you lose quite a few of your buildings in Jasper?
Yeah,
with that
no,
fire?
Jasper was a little bit of a heartbreak there because
Yeah.
there was actually 19 of the structures that we had formerly worked on
19.
have
Wow.
disappeared. Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, all your log homes have the, is it a wrought iron tree on them?
If there's a log truss as a connector plate, yes, we do a little silhouette of a tree. And I've there's a logo that I created before I ever started my company, and we even have a brand. And it just got put by the wayside for a long time, but we're starting to leave the brand back on our buildings.
That's
there.
great. Yeah, no, because I've been on road trips and I've seen log buildings and I've looked and I've found your brand and I'm like, that's a Mark Deagle.
Yeah.
So,
So
you know, if
we're
I'm
going to try
picking
to be
up on
more
that,
faithful
I
to it
think
in
you
the
should
future.
stick
here.
with it. That's great.
Yeah.
One thing I was wondering too, just when you mentioned like using lodgepole pine, can you use like the pine bark beetle damaged trees? Can that be part of building or?
It definitely. As a matter of fact, we just had some oversized pine come into the yard about a month ago, and one of them was clearly a beetle tree.
Yeah, because it's just like blue.
Yeah.
Blue stain.
Yeah.
And on that particular tree, it got. We cut it to 8 inches thick. So we took the two of the round sides off, so it's still you can still view its full diameter, and it's got the root flare in it, and we're going to use it as a post. Right in the heart of the house,
cool.
like right, it'll be the center post, and it's as blue as can be as a result of the pine beetles, and it looks spectacular. Cool. I was away yesterday when they cut it, and I came back and it looks just so neat. Yeah.
Wow.
And it might not be to everybody's taste, but you know we're putting it in the house regardless, and I'm just happy that it's there because those darn beetles, but they're still a part of the
Still able to
cycle,
use
part
them.
of the
Some people
forest.
like that blue stain and seek it out.
Yeah.
It's got a market of its own.
No, and this one just looks it's the best blue stain log I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now you've done some pretty remote projects as well, where you've had to use helicopters or get stuff way in the backcountry. Maybe reflect a bit on that for our listeners on some of those crazier projects you've done.
Those were actually really they've all been really exciting projects, and the first one was back in 1984, and I was approached by Parks Canada to put a warden's cabin in kind of the remote northeast corner of Jasper Park. And same thing, we prefab that in Jasper and then loaded all that and all the components onto a semi-trailer. And that was my first experience. Hired a helicopter, and at the time that machine was $2,000 an hour, and I was having 50 fits about how am I going to afford all this. And it did a lot of pre-planning, because when you're out there, if you've forgotten a nail, well, you've simply forgotten that last nail.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So everything has to be accounted for. And but I remember the first day, we flew everything off the back of the semi-trailer right at the staging area at Rock Lake, and it went up to just below Eagle's Nest Pass.
Yeah.
Is where the cabin was located.
But on the Jasper Park side, not
just
within
into the
Wilmore.
park. Yeah. And so we got in there and got everything, like all the loads came in there, and we thought everything is here. We're ready to start. And we even did get started right on that very first day. And a friend of mine had come along and offered, he set up the outfitter's tent and was the camp cook. And I remember he put together this fine meal, and things couldn't be better. So anyhow, we settled down that night, and I was just about ready to fall asleep, and all of a sudden I just thought, man, I'm not feeling good. And I ended up crawling outside the tent and getting ill, and I thought, I must have a bug or something. And then I realized that it was just, I got myself so worked up about, that $2,000 an hour.
The anxiety.
And just getting everything in there, and my stomach just couldn't handle it. Yeah.
So, but what do you do? Like the logs are dropped off by helicopter. You're in the middle of nowhere. You don't have your front end loader. How are you hoisting thousands of pounds of logs
On that
by
one,
hand?
we the helicopter could drop them. I was right there actually as the loads were coming in, and we knew where the foundation was going to be built, and we got those logs as close as possible, and then just using ramps, and there was 4 of us, and we could sort of lift one end at a time, and so that one was just brute force.
That's incredible.
But then we did another cabin up on the Skyline Trail just outside of Jasper, and that was in 1992. And what we did is we made a little floor-mounted crane, and it was kind of like a pallet jack that they would use for moving pallets in the back of a semi-trailer at a warehouse. And we could reach out over the wall and pick a log up and then just move it anywhere once the floor was complete. And that we just flew that in under the helicopter. And then we've used that a couple of times on backcountry situations.
Wow.
Yeah. And it does teach you to be innovative and
Oh yeah.
kind of scratch your head a couple of times before you make a move.
So
So
to be
that,
adaptable.
yeah.
Ross is a real like sentimental guy. Like like you're attached to your projects. One of the things that we were going to talk about this episode too, Scott, was your heritage. Even I know you mentioned you're up in the Grand Cache working on the Métis community up there recently.
That's correct, yeah.
What's going on up there?
Well, there's just the Mountain Métis have put together a community center, and actually, I guess I was involved right from the get-go, and then the plans got a little more grand, and it was out of my league, the size and scale that they wanted. But it sort of got simplified to becoming a frame building, and then but with log highlights, and so we got invited to come in and do the highlights, which was just perfect. I'm just really excited about what we've added to that. But on that. If I could just give a little bit of background on some of my, I guess, lineage.
Yeah, go for it.
A fellow who's real inspirational to me, too, is my old granddad. And he was a neat old guy that, 12 years old, his father answered the call of the homesteader. And they lived in a suburb of London and came to Canada. Wow. And so I say he was 12 years old, and then when he was, I guess, 18 or 19, he moved to the new town of Jasper. So, yeah, he arrived there in 1918 and just looking for work, and ended up becoming a horse wrangler and a guide and a camp cook. And he did that for 20 years and then ended up becoming park warden in Jasper right up until his retirement.
Okay.
And so, but my granny, she arrived in the same year, but it was about 6 years later they got married. And granny was a Métis gal, and she grew up in Father Lacombe's mission. She was an orphan, and so she has like a remembrance of Father Lacombe at his mission in St. Albert. So that was her home for her first 17 or 18 years, and then she too moved to Jasper. So that is where the Métis connection came in. But it would have been my granny's great-grandfather. And he was part of a brigade which in 1826 left York Factory and crossed the country, came right through Hinton here and on up to Jasper, up to the headwaters of the Whirlpool River, and then over Athabasca Pass down onto the Columbia. And this was, say, in 1826. And he would have been a teenager at that time, and ended up down at Fort Vancouver, which is right near the mouth of the Columbia River.
Yeah.
And there, for the Hudson's Bay, he served his apprenticeship and then made his way back, I think, up to Fort Langley and then back into Alberta. And so I got
That's so cool. We were just talking about this last week on the podcast. We did a section on the history with the local museum here, and we talked about the Athabasca Pass and what a major trade route this was for the whole express brigades, and
Yeah.
I had no idea that you had a linkage to that. That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now you've also yourself been on horseback and been in the Wilmore and that, and I know your
Yeah, I
family's
think-
pretty comfortable around horses. and-
Through my granddad, like he was a real horse guy. Maybe not so much in England, but coming here, and his whole career sort of revolved around horses. And then his son, my uncle, who's certainly my favorite uncle, he was an inspiration to me always. And he was a real horse guy as well. And so it sort of eluded me for many years, although the interest was strong. But I suppose 15 years ago I became involved, and it seems to work out real good. Like at the ranch presently, I'm up every morning feeding 16 horses there, and it's just nice to be around those guys.
Oh yeah.
And so I've done some pack trips, and then something, and I have to credit my daughter. She is just the speediest little horse packer you've ever seen. And so we put some teams together in the local rodeo, and have won a number of first place buckles.
Oh, yeah.
One which I'm wearing here
There
this
you
evening.
go.
And and that's a lot of fun. And things are done a little differently in the rodeo arena with a pack horse than what they would be out on the trail.
I bet. Yeah.
You're looking for all these sneaky little tricks that make things happen quickly, but
Yeah.
it's really exciting. I enjoy that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We have a podcast question of the week I thought we could get into, because I kind of want to get into this with you too. But one of the questions, the question for this week, and thanks for everyone that sent in responses, what's the coolest thing that you have built? Scott, you said your bushcraft kayak, your favorite thing you built? Coolest thing?
I'm typically building primitive weapons and bows. I've done a lot of that, and bolas and slings. But built a bushcraft kayak out of black spruce and willows. And it's floated me for 2 years with a tarp around it, and I've gone fishing with it. And I'd like to do a little bit of backcountry kayaking on a handmade kayak this summer. That's kind of on the bucket list, but that's probably, I've built some cool A-frames in the backcountry. I'd be embarrassed to show Mark, but I was pretty proud
You're not
of them.
branding them?
Yeah. I'm not going to put my brand on it. But, for survival shelters, it's kind of fun to play around with different things to keep you alive in the wintertime.
Ty wrote in, said that built the bikes and designed and sewed all the bags we used for a 10,000 kilometer bike packing trip. So
that's cool.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool one. Crystal wrote in saying she built some stairs and also a fish bonker. She loved the spinning process. So I was trying to think, like a fish bonker. She must have like she's spinning it on whatever that thing's called.
Lathe?
Yeah, I'm assuming that's what she's talking about for that.
That's a
cool.
fancy fish bonker.
Yeah. Dale built a treehouse for the kids and still standing. Carmen said she made her own sauna and they use it daily. It was a fun build. Keith said he made a walking stick for my dad that turned out pretty cool. And another lady wrote in saying, not sure if this counts, but I knitted sweaters for my whole family one year. So lots of cool little projects.
Counts, yeah.
Mark, when you look back on your 214 projects, do you got a favorite?
I would say one does stand out in my mind, and it was a project we did for a young fellow who took over a hunting outfit out in the Coast Mountains, BC, and we never saw it, but I think we were 25 kilometers from saltwater, but just into the Coast Mountains.
Okay.
One fjord wound its way up there. And absolute middle of nowhere, we traveled 140 kilometers out on the log road, and there was this great big barge went across what's known as Tatsa Reach, and it's part of a bunch of lakes got flooded to run a powerhouse or create electricity for the smelter at Kitimat, the aluminum smelter at Kitimat. Mm-hmm. But we were still a long ways from Kitimat, but we were basically north of Bella Coola and west of Houston, BC, at this place called Troitsa Lake, and did everything in our yard in Hinton, loaded onto a semi-trailer and then a number of just gooseneck trailers hauled behind pickups, went out to the end of the log road. A helicopter met us there and flew 32 flights in there, and I thought,
Wow.
oh, great, we get to go for a helicopter ride. But it was such a rugged shoreline on this lake that we built right at the head of the lake that there was no place for the helicopter to set down. But the outfitter on the year previous to when we did this project, he had dragged an aluminum speedboat in there, kind of a workhorse type boat. And so once we flew everything out, like slung all the loads into the helicopter, and then we took a side-by-side into the lake shore, which was about 10K, and then got on the lake and 25, 30K up to the head of the lake, and that's where the building site was. And he'd set up a bit of a dock there. He'd been in previous occasions. And we put up a 20 by 24 cabin, which sort of became the base lodge for his hunting, fishing operation. And I'd have to say that one stands out. It was in such a remote, spectacular location. And I think just the satisfaction of getting everything in there, and that turned out really successfully, that little cabin.
Yeah, again, for your hoist, were you using that handmade?
Yeah, we used that little floor machine there too. Yeah.
And you guys built that yourself, the hoist?
Yeah, it just had.
You got to patent that, man.
Well, it had a worn truck winch on it to do the lifting, but yeah, it's a pretty simple little affair, which was made to fold down so that we could then fly it under the helicopter. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and so that might stand out as a highlight, but it's more I think the overall experience. And again, here we are going back to that romantic notion, but it was truly the cabin in the wilderness. And,
yeah. I mean, this whole podcast has been so wonderful. We've heard about all these great things. We need to dig into when things don't go right. And I'm sure in your many years, something's gone wrong at least once, and you need a good conflict for a good story. So you got any accidents, things that didn't go right, the hoist broke, somebody almost lost their legs? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Something. When you're dealing with chainsaws and heavy timber, there's got to be something here, Mark.
Just last week I was reminiscing about a story which is probably the best one to answer the question. And it was in my first year of being a builder, and we were down in the Similkameen Valley, which is right at the very south end of British Columbia, just west of the Okanagan. And it was a real wind tunnel through there, kind of a flat valley, but mountainous on both sides. And when the wind blew there, it really blew. And I remember very clearly the house that we were building. I don't think I've ever seen such uniform logs as what the fellow that we built for was a logger, and he brought in just these incredible spruce logs, and they were all big. I don't think there was anything less. Smallest diameter that we would have dealt with on that house would have been like tops of 16 inches. But they were just like gun barrels.
That's
like
the
they might only be
tops,
24 inches on the butt. But it just so there was one log on that particular house. I remember I had to measure each end to find out which was the top, because to look at it you couldn't tell. So just absolutely beautiful big logs. And but on this very windy morning, I went into one room of the house. It had a little wing coming off the house, and we had just cut out 2 windows. And so there was a window to the left, a window to the right. So what it did is it left a panel of 4 logs without any notches to support it. And in that wind, I could see that wall was waving back and forth. So I thought, I've got to put a brace on that. So there was some lumber on the floor right in front of me. I reached down to pick it up, and I felt as though somebody was nudging me on the shoulder. I thought, who would that be? And then all of a sudden, next thing I know is put down onto my hands and knees, and here I had probably 2,000 pounds of logs sitting on my back.
Oh,
what?
And I thought, and at the end, I went down in a hurry, and I smashed my face into the floor, and I got a false tooth here to show the damage done. So I knocked that tooth out, and but I could see my friend George was in the other room. He was trying to start his chainsaw, but it was giving him some grief. And I say the wind was howling, and I just started to call out from being pinned under these logs. And I was in like hands and knees position, but all this weight on my back. And So I just started screaming, and George came in, and George, he was kind of built like Arnold Schwarzenegger Jr., this fella. He was just a super muscular guy. And he saw that I was bleeding from the mouth, and his first thought is that it was internal injuries, which was easy to imagine with that weight sitting on my back, but it was just a tooth knocked out. And he came over there, and he lifted one corner of that panel, and I scurried out from underneath it, and I got up on my feet, and I said, I can't believe it, I'm okay. And boy, at that time, I just went to jelly. And there was another character that we worked with, Tommy Logwalker, this native guy is what he called himself, was Tom Smitheram, but he went by the name of Tommy Logwalker. He arrived in the room there, and George was there, and they just kind of scooped me up like the wounded soldier and took me into the local clinic, and there was really no damage done.
Wow.
But I've never had that situation where I exerted every muscle in my body to fight back against that weight that was on me. And so that was probably about the most dramatic
that could have been
event.
really bad. Your guardian angels were working overtime.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And the only trouble is I've been indebted to George for my entire life, because I believe he saved my life. If he hadn't come in there, I don't know how long I would have lasted. And those logs certainly had the ability to have a crushing effect.
I'm amazed they didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, that's a lot of weight. A lot of weight. Wow.
Yeah. And ever since that day, we make a point of bracing things as we go, so that never. And I say that was first year, and thought we were doing well, but I realized I was a bit naive in that situation. Yeah. So not everything's gone 100%, but
almost 100%. Yeah.
I've always said if you do everything correctly, the results will be correct. So
Good.
And I try to live by that.
What's on the bucket list? You got something you want to build you haven't built yet? Or is there a house or a location you want to try something at?
I've been looking for a good log builder to build my place for me. But no, we are slowly getting lined up. We've come up with a plan over the last couple of months.
Oh, cool.
And we've had a property for a number of years just out on the road to Brule.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking it's time to put up a place. And
I didn't even know that. That's great.
Yeah. And
can't wait for the housewarming party.
Yeah.
No, there will be one. Yeah. And it's not going to be anything grand. It you may call it sort of a dream home, but I've learned that happiness can come through practicality too. I don't want to sort of torture ourselves with something that's beyond our means.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again too, you asked me, my favorite building was a little 20 by 24 cabin in the wilderness.
In the middle of nowhere.
So
Yeah.
And we've had lots of wonderful experiences with a lot of wonderful customers, and some people have just gone on to be lifelong friends. So that's a really nice situation, is to have these strangers show up, build a house for them, and then you're always welcome back at that place. And well, we assisted your friend Dr. Stockberger.
Right.
Yeah. Like I know that you knew Mark.
Yep.
But Mark's dad, Howard, and
I've been to that.
Yeah,
house.
You've been to that place.
Yeah.
And man, this fellow was a retired surgeon, and we gave him a hand. But basically, I kind of coached him. We'd have a little huddle every morning, and I'd say, okay, if you do this, and you got to watch out for this detail. And he'd put together all these pieces, and we went up and helped him assemble this house up north of Athabasca, and everything just absolutely fit. And it was kind of shocking. I thought, and I told him, I said, "Man, you're smart, Howard." I said, "You could have been a doctor."
Yeah, surgical precision. I did some. Actually, his son's a doctor as well, Mark. Right, and. We were filleting fish and trying to get the bones out of pike, which is a challenge. And just to watch Mark Stockberger do this as a doctor, way better than I ever could. I'm in there like a butcher, but he's in there like a surgeon. It was just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
is there a whole different section of like maintenance for a log house then, like compared to just a normal drywall house? Like, is there a lot of considerations people got to put in for something like that?
There certainly could be, but with that being said, like maintenance would boil down to the outside of the house and the aesthetics. And if, say, once every 3 years, once every 5 years, another coat of stain, and it keeps the house looking fresh and ready. And I know one guy, he would just give a light coat of oil every year. He'd just make it a spring weekend. He'd actually wash the house one day, and then the following day he'd just put just a very light coat of stain on it, and that house to this day looks spectacular. It was built in 1990. But I've got a compadre, like through the Log Builders Association over in Switzerland, and he just shakes his head every time. And if he can convince his customer to go without any stain, just allowing the wood to weather naturally. And I've been in some villages up in the Alps there, and where there's not any sort of protective coating on the wood. And there's one, we had some friends living in a little village not too far from the Matterhorn. And the most important structure in town was probably the oldest, and it was a log building, and it had this very large roof on it, big overhangs, and that place was 500 years old.
Wow.
But and I say it was the most critical structure in the village. It was the wine press. And there was a great big timber on kind of a pivot point, and they could just pull down, and there was a big stump that would come onto a table, much like what's in front of us here. And it just had a rim around it, and then the grapes would get squeezed under all that pressure and then drain off into a bucket they had on the side for the production of wine. But yeah, say it was 500 years old,
that's amazing.
And never had anything on it, and those logs were almost black with weather. But I looked very closely for any signs of deterioration, and there was none. There was no rot.
Yeah, I grew up in Europe, and I've been in some of those big old churches and cathedrals, and you climb the staircases, and you find these big old oak beams, and they're from like 1200, 1300s.
Yeah,
and they're as good as the day they were put in there. It blows the mind.
Yeah, no. Say if it takes oxygen and water,
moisture,
the combination
right?
of the two, and then that's the start of rot.
Yeah.
But if you can isolate water from the equation, and a big roof overhang will do that, then you're set for, So that's why I say the 400-year warranty is
400-year warranty. That's good.
Nobody's
that's
ever going to
warranty.
I'm never going to have to honor it. That's the deal. Yeah.
You mentioned the Log Builder Association a few times, just with like the connections you have. Like, is it like a pretty big, like it's a worldwide organization then, or?
It is worldwide, but I wouldn't say it's big. Like I'd say globally, log builders make up a pretty small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
But they have great conferences, and it's a bunch of old guys like me, and we get together and talk about how good we used to be.
Right.
And but no, I quite enjoy being a member, and I've made some really good connections with that association. And just before we got the show started here this evening, I was telling you that back in 2004, I attended one out on Vancouver Island, a conference. And the conferences always get started with what we call log builder games. And just to set the record straight, these games are attended by those who just wish to go in. It's not like every log builder in the world is there. But anyhow, I volunteered to go in.
Yeah.
I was keen to give it a whirl. And at that time, there was 4 different exercises that you had to go through, and then they'd compile your score. And on that particular year, I was lucky enough to become the grand champion. So for that year, I could credit myself as being the world's top log builder.
There you go.
Yeah.
And then
nice.
That's amazing.
10 years later, in 2014, I entered again, and and what was there was 2014, that's right, that was on Vancouver Island. I got that point, and then I just about got first place just as before we entered into COVID. And but I think I had a second place there, and I credited myself with having the longest standing, sort of being a champion. But it's only because we didn't get together for about 3 years as a result of COVID. Yeah. But no,
That's great.
That felt really good. Like, just amongst my peers, and
Did you
and
get
there's a good
you get a
spirit.
trophy or a chainsaw or just
You
bragging
know,
rights?
My favorite little chainsaw that I've rebuilt many times since was a prize from the 2004.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Also a husky.
Yeah.
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 So you were happy.
And then last year, the conference was out in Quebec, and there was a group there from Estonia, and what they offered, first place winner of the games, was a trip to the Log Builder Games and Conference in Estonia. But sadly, I came in second place, and I was offered, I could go to the conference, but I'd have to pay my own way there. So it just wouldn't have worked out. We were busy, and So no, this association has members from Estonia, Norway, Germany, Switzerland, England, of course, United States, Canada, Japan.
That's huge.
Yeah, so it truly isn't the International Log Builders Association.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Is it time for Would You Rather,
Yeah, let's do
George?
Would You Rather before we wind her down, and then I got one good Would You Rather.
I got one good one. Mine takes a while to set up, so let's do yours first.
Okay, I might have set the bar too high when I said good. But, okay, so this is Would You Rather. Okay, so would you rather be able to talk to squirrels or climb trees with super strength?
Oh, climb trees with super strength.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, because then, like bow hunting or escaping bears or something, grizzlies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just fly up a tree.
But how often are you running away from a grizzly bear? Though?
Well, just knowing you could. Now you can tease them a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, bow hunting, you don't need a tree stand and
Just climb straight up the tree.
Just shimmy up.
As opposed to talking to a squirrel.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't like squirrels, right?
No, every hunter hates squirrels because you sit there, try to be quiet, and they come and yak at you and tell everybody that you're hunting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was when I first met you or something. We were talking about squirrels, and you're like, they're rats with like fuzzy tails.
Yeah, rats with good PR.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
What do you think, Mark? Super strength to climb trees or be able to talk to squirrels?
I guess I probably talk to squirrels, just tell them, get out of here. So I've got that one covered, but I'd like to have that strength to be able to climb trees. Yeah.
I was thinking if you had that strength, you wouldn't need your hoist. You just heave those trees
up there.
out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, what's yours, Scott?
Okay, mine takes a little setup here, but I think it's a good one.
All right.
Okay, it's kind of with the theme. Would you rather build a log cabin from scratch? Okay, that's you and an axe and a saw, and live in it for a year alone in the bush, hunt for your own food. You're only allowed to carry enough provision that you can carry on your back. So if you're carrying like your rifle, flour, salt, all that stuff. So if you can carry 70, 80, 90, 100 pounds, good for you. But that's all you've got for the year. You got to build your cabin. You got to live there a year. Okay, we got that? We're cool, we're cool with that. Or, and remember, on the show alone, most people don't make it 60 days. Some make it 100 days. So you got to do 365 days. If you don't think you can hack
That's in
it,
the Rocky Mountains out here somewhere?
Yeah, in the Rockies here.
Okay.
Yeah, and anything goes. You can poach elk. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Or if you don't think you can hack it, you have to spend a year in a maximum security prison. But you got your food, water, shelter, warmth, but you're in prison. So there you are, alone in the bush, build your cabin, live for a year, or a year in prison, maximum security prison, with Bubba as your roommate.
Great. I mean, I got to go in the bush. I couldn't do prison, I don't think. I think I could do a year, but like when you say you can only bring in the food and rifle on your back.
Whatever you can carry, like bags of flour,
Yeah.
rice, or whatever you decide.
I'd have to do some planning to figure that out. Like I don't know how much craft dinner I'm bringing in with me, but yeah, I would do the bush for a year.
Yeah. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, that would be a definite not wanting to go to prison. Yeah. I know that the fellow that I worked with down in Oregon, he had a winter place down on Baja, and I traveled down with him there. That had to be 20 years ago, and we went by this a little place on the Baja Peninsula called Lorito, and there was this prison. It looked like something out of the prison you'd see on the Bugs Bunny cartoon. And I just looking at those big black walls, and I just thought I couldn't stand to be in there for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So, we've done many projects, and as a teenager, I did backpacking all through Jasper Park. And, so I've spent a lot of time out in the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
But that would definitely be a challenge,
to
be out there for a year. And, there'd be the challenge of having to build a structure and then, just to survive for that time.
Yep.
But I would far rather throw in the towel with that program than to spend a day in any sort of prison.
Yeah. I think I'm the same. I think you'd be shooting moose and elk, and you got your meat. Hopefully you brought enough carbs and sugar and salt.
Yeah.
And then just hope you don't get injured or sick, right? Be pretty lonely though. I don't mind doing solo trips for a few days, but a whole year is a long time to be alone. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to me, it would beat prison, and just, I think that's something I just really appreciate is, kind of the freedom to make every day happen as you would choose to make it happen.
Yeah.
And
that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. As we wind this down, Mark, I'm curious if you have any advice for someone that's maybe like, a younger person want to get into log building. Like, is there some schooling people do, or like, do they just write you a letter, or like, what's the best way to do it?
Like, I know myself that was my story. Is I wrote a letter to the boss, and obviously,
I'd like to see that letter.
I would like to see it. It wouldn't have been that long. And, I remember trying to impress upon him, how interested I was and how much knowledge I had. But, I realized I was a complete newbie. I think for somebody who wants to do it, they could just make it happen.
Yeah.
And I guess I've listened to, sort of testimonies from like bronc riders and that, and they say you just got to be hungry for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a way. Yeah. And, and I say, I almost feel that I was kind of born to do this. I just think of the interest that I had at like 9 years of age. And I remember going on a family holiday in 1969, how I would have been maybe 10 or 11 at that time. And every town we came to, and there was an old log building, it just totally appealed to me. It was almost kind of weird, really, when I think about it. But
it was meant to be. Yeah.
I didn't realize that was sort of setting my destiny, I guess. But no, and honestly, my interest today was as much as it ever was like 45 years ago.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard that is find something you love and you don't have to work another day in your life.
Right.
Yeah. And I've been very fortunate that way. And it's kind of great to be here this evening talking about all this, and just kind of a realization that the path that I have gone down is certainly the one that I have no regrets, and really glad that this is the way life has unfolded.
Yeah.
And just all the adventure, social connections that it's made, and the travel, different places I've seen. I just, for me, it's been just a perfect pathway to take. Yeah.
A very incredibly unique life. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Wonderful.
Mark Deagle, Log Building Ltd. on Facebook. You can find you there. Is that like the best way for someone to reach out to you if they wanted?
I think it would be, and I'm
Pictures
certainly
of some
no
of the work you've done.
Facebooker, but Travis, who works for me, he's faithful to it. And,
Okay.
And I'm really not a promoter.
Yeah.
You've got
But-
a lot of good pictures of your structures there, though.
Yeah,
If
no,
people
he-
are listening here.
Yeah, I was scrolling through it last
Go
night.
on there
Man,
and
there's
scroll
some
through.
beautiful
There's some
stuff.
amazing log building that you'll
Yeah.
see there. Yeah.
And our Facebook page is not really intended as a sales item. It's more of just I suppose, a scrapbook. And,
Yeah.
just for interest as to what we have accomplished. And so, I'd certainly invite anybody to have a look at that.
Scott Sunderwald, Northern Rockies Bushcraft on Instagram.
You bet.
Follow along with Scott on that one. Mark, thanks so much for coming on and chatting with us tonight. This was amazing, and I from the feedback we've got on just mentioning that you're coming on the podcast, a lot of people excited to hear your story. So I think it'll be a big hit.
Well, I'm flattered.
Yeah.
Thank you. No, I'm really happy about the invite. And
Yeah. We want to do a part 2. George and I have talked about it. We hear you have an axe collection.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to come out to your site, crack a beer, look at your axes.
Yeah.
We could do a whole session on different style of axes, and I've got my own background on some of that too, and I think that could be a real
That'd be
fun
fun.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
You be down for that?
Oh, I'd be
No
really
pressure.
keen.
Leave the gate open. We'll be
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So, no, that sounds great. Yeah.
Perfect. Mark Deagle, Log Building LTD Facebook. Follow him on there. Scott, as I mentioned, Northern Rockies Bushcraft. We'll be back next week. And if you want to send us a message, wildernesswave@outlook.com, or leave us a review wherever you're listening. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I've really enjoyed it.
It was an honor, man. It was a good time.
Beautiful.
Wilderness Wavelength.